Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating, honestly kind of cinematic look at a beautiful piece of poetry by r.boddie, titled Mellitus. We're going to navigate a very human, incredibly vulnerable journey together, the sudden onset of an unexpected health crisis and the deep reflections that follow right after. It's this masterful blend of stark medical reality and gorgeous nautical metaphor. So get comfortable, clear your mind for a few minutes, and let's set sail into this powerful source material. Okay, let's dive right into this with the very first lines of the poem. The author introduces us to our central subject, Nana. And look at that first line. A regatta was not Nana's idea. Now, regatta, as you probably know, is a boat race. It's a fierce, high-stakes competition on the water, but Nana, she is absolutely not looking for a race. Her bucket list is complete. She's done what she needed to do in life, checked all the boxes. She simply wanted a peaceful, quiet retirement. She isn't asking for any more excitement, you know?
So that brings us to part one, a well-earned rest, the baseline before the storm. The poem immediately establishes Nana's physical preparedness. It literally tells us she is well-kept after reps and steps. This wasn't someone who just neglected her health. She put in the hard physical work over the years. She did the reps, she took the steps, and because of that intense diligence, she felt she'd finally earned what the poet calls a lazy float in her later life, just drifting on calm waters. I think a lot of us can relate to that, right? We put in the hard work so we can eventually just kick back and rest. But biology, as we're about to see, doesn't always care about our meticulously made plans.
Part 2. The Sudden Storm. When physiology becomes a riptide.
To really grasp the inciting incident here, we've got to look at the title of the poem itself, Mellitus. It's derived directly from diabetes mellitus, which is a medical condition characterized by dangerously high levels of glucose in the blood. The poet writes, just as she leaned on work put in, alas, away her baseline drifted. That word baseline is just brilliant here. It acts as both the steady starting point of a ship's journey and the healthy baseline of a patient's vital signs. Suddenly, her body is setting off loud mayday calls. The sweeping nautical metaphors of the sea are now completely tangled up with the harsh medical reality of a sudden metabolic emergency.
And the poet brilliantly maps this biological crisis onto a shipwreck. A snapped compass represents the literal loss of equilibrium, and that's driven by waves of cortisol. Cortisol is a primary stress hormone that absolutely spikes when the body enters a medical crisis. The image of the compass snapping perfectly captures that terrifying disorientation that happens during a severe medical event. You've completely lost your true north.
Next, the poet writes, high glucose set a rough course, in retirement and also in danger. Again, the juxtaposition here is just stunning. High glucose, dangerous blood sugar levels, is the literal wind pushing this ship straight into the storm. This retired champion who, remember, was just looking for a lazy float, is now navigating incredibly rough waters. The chemistry of her own blood has turned against her, placing her in immediate, unforeseen danger.
Notice how incredibly rapidly this cascade of failures happens. First, the baseline drifts as things start to feel a bit off. Then, mayday calls trigger the body's internal alarms. Under all that strain, her physical engine sputters, leading to a terrifyingly rapid descent into a full collapse on the horizon. The cadence of the poem actually accelerates here, mimicking the quick, terrifying progression of a medical emergency. You can almost feel the panic of a ship going down in real time.
Which pulls us into part 3, breaking the surface, the climax of the crisis. Sirens sounded at Nana's decline. Think about the dual meaning going on here for a second. There are the literal sirens of the ambulance rushing to save her, and the figurative alarms of a sinking vessel. The poet highlights that all too fast was her reversal. It really makes you think. 1 minute you're enjoying your retirement, enjoying your well-kept health, and the very next minute everything is completely reversed. It's a pretty stark reminder of our own human fragility. Lashed to monitors and plugs. Notice what happens to the imagery right here. The vast, sweeping, romantic metaphors of the ocean, the compass, the regatta, they all instantly vanish, just gone. They're replaced by this incredibly stark, clinical reality. Being lashed to monitors and plugs invokes the feeling of a sailor desperately tied to the mast during a hurricane, but the reality is the cold, sterile environment of an ICU or a hospital bed. This is where the actual fight for survival is taking place.
But then, salvation. The poet writes that she broke surface with a gulp. After the wreckage, after the terrifying descent into that metabolic storm, she is rescued.
This line gives us the palpable heavy relief of survival. It's the literal moment of a drowning sailor taking their first desperate breath above the water, and the metaphorical moment of Nana regaining her consciousness and finally stabilizing in the hospital. The crisis has passed. She survived the undertow.
Part 4. Flowing with Chemistry. The undertow's new insight.
The poem tells us the undertow lent new insight. And isn't that the truth? Surviving a terrifying near-death experience, surviving the undertow that literally tries to pull you down to the bottom, inevitably changes how you view the world. For Nana, this massive crisis gave her a profound new perspective on her relationship with her own aging body. She can't just rely on the reps and steps of her youth anymore. The rules of the sea have permanently changed.
Let's recap who Nana really is based on what the poet told us earlier. She spent 50 years hoisting her mast. She has always been a champion, facing life's currents. She is undeniably strong. But true strength isn't always just about stubbornly fighting the waves, is it? It's about adaptability. What the poem shows us is that her past strength as a champion has now evolved into a different, much wiser kind of resilience. She is evolving to accept the changing tides, rather than exhausting herself trying to fight a storm she has no control over. Which brings us to the most powerful message of the poem and really the ultimate takeaway of this explainer. As a fish made for the sea, flow with your changing chemistry. Wow, this is such an empowering, beautiful reframing of the whole situation. We are all fish made for the sea of life, but our internal oceans, our chemistry, our biology will change as we age. We might encounter mellitus or massive cortisol spikes or any number of health crises. The poet is urging us not to fight the ocean, but to adapt, to flow with our changing chemistry. It's all about radical acceptance of our physical vessels. So, as we wrap up this exploration of r.boddie's incredible poem, I want to leave you with a final thought to reflect on. How will you navigate the changing tides of your own biology? When your compass inevitably snaps or your baseline drifts, will you fight the undertow or will you find a way to flow with your changing chemistry? Thank you so much for joining me on this voyage through Mellitus. Keep learning, keep flowing, and I'll see you in the next explainer.